Hi, my name is Ryan Cooney. I work on the team that builds Geocortex Essentials. I'd like to show you how you can deploy Essentials in a way to achieve high availability. Let's see how it's done. Configuring Geocortex Essentials to be highly available is really about deploying Essentials on multiple machines and then configuring those two machines or two or more machines to share resources and sort of play by the same rules. Now, before we get into anything, we should mention that this is documented what I'm going to go through, so how to actually deploy this. It's on our support center. If you go to the knowledge base section and just search for cluster or load balancing, you'll find this document, which is going to walk you through the steps that you need to actually achieve this. But I'm going to start with just a bit of an overview of how Essentials is actually deployed in a simple case, and then we'll look at what a clustered case looks like, and then go through actually the steps we would take to achieve this. So the diagram we're looking at right now is a typical Essentials installation on one machine. You can see at the top we've got our web applications. That's where your users are accessing the software. They're accessing the software over the internet, so they're entering your organization typically through a viewer, and that viewer is going to communicate with the Essentials REST API. Now, the Essentials REST API is doing a few things. It's communicating with an internal component called Geocortex Core, and it's also reading and writing site XML files and other resources like that. So that's sort of really high level how Essentials is operating. Your end users are coming in, accessing the REST API, and then the REST API talks to an internal component called Core and accesses local file resources and things that are like file resources. So that's the one server system. Now, if we want to scale this out to two machines, basically we're going to end up with two installs of Essentials, but we're going to want them to talk to the same core, or talk to cores in the same sort of way, and we're going to want them to share some of these file system resources. So this diagram is more of an enterprise setup that's got multiple servers. There's an extra layer in here for reverse proxy, but that's not really important to this discussion. But the idea is that your end users, they still enter, they still access your software through the internet, but they're being redirected to one of two machines that are installed in parallel, and that's typically with something called a load balancer. And often this reverse proxy layer, it is your load balancer. That's pretty common. So requests are coming into the load balancer, and they will be directed to one of the two machines. Those machines, they have a REST API. The REST API is going to talk to Geocortex Core, and in this case, they're going to talk to a redundant file share. So this redundant file share is where we're going to put all of the site XML files and temporary files for print jobs and things like that. Now, the core communication, Core actually has its own ability to talk to other nodes of Core, so it can cluster itself. Now, this system can basically work with as many Essentials nodes, so we could add more Essentials nodes here, and they're all going to work the same way. All of the cores are going to talk together, and each of the Essentials instances is going to be configured to talk to this shared storage, and the load balancer out front will just either hit round robin or have some scheme for deciding where to route requests. But basically all of these Essentials instances will play nicely together. They're all going to share these resources, and if one of them were to go down, let's say someone unplugs a machine, the other machines in the cluster are still servicing those requests and they're able to take over. So let's take a look at what you would actually see as an experience. So I'm going to skip most of the installer, but when you're installing Essentials, the post installer for the very first time is going when you're installing Essentials on a machine is going to prompt you to install Core. Now, this is the panel that you'll see when we're installing Core, and basically it's going to say, do you want to create a new cluster or do you want to join an existing cluster? So if this is the first install, the first machine you're processing, you're going to supply a cluster name, anything you're choosing, just make it unique, and you're going to create a secret. So it's basically like a password that the clusters are going to use to join one another. So you can come up with whatever password you like. Please remember it, because it's hard to recover that after the fact. On subsequent machines, when you're installing this, you're going to select the other box where you're going to select the cluster to join. You can pick from an existing name, and then you would supply the shared secret. That's all we need to do to get the cores to join each other. So on each node, we're selecting to join that cluster. Now, if we hop back to the instructions, there are also a couple of settings that we're going to have to update. And these are in some web config files. So basically, we need to tell Essentials two things. One, where to find the sites directory, so that's where all your site XML files are, and two, where to find the temporary files directories. So really it's just these two app settings right here are what we need to copy into the web config files of Essentials. And I'll just show you where those are. This is where my Essentials instance is installed. And inside REST elements, there is a REST application and a manager application. I'm gonna have to edit them both. But there's a web config file. And basically in here is where the app settings are. So we're just gonna paste those two in, and we're gonna repeat that for both Essentials REST and manager, and we'll repeat that across all the different machines. So now they're pointing at the same file resources. And one little caveat with this is that it's kind of highlighted in here that this is a redundant file share. There's lots of ways to just get them to share the same files, but you really want to use an enterprise quality redundant file share so that that file share itself isn't your single point of failure, that it has backups of its own that can be used. So that's kind of the lay of the land of how Essentials can be clustered. There's a ton to this if you want to really dig into this, but that's the high level, and hopefully that's helped you understand it a little bit more.